thanks everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you getting on this webinar with us every week. I'm going to remind everybody to keep their lines muted and to use the chat feature. And Melissa and John will address your questions at the end of the presentation. With that, I'm going to turn this over to John and Melissa. John, take it away.
Thank you, Hope, and welcome everyone to this week's webinar. And thank you, Melissa, for all the preparation you've done getting ready for this. There's a lot going on that mostly Melissa's going to talk about. I'd like to remind you that this is a webinar that's designed for restaurants, hotels, and our travel and tourism partners. It's not designed for the press. We're happy to deal with any press inquiries on a one-on-one basis. But if you're a member of the press today, this is off the record, please disconnect. Thank you. Also like to thank our partners at Dell Technologies who have been very generous, particularly at this time of need for all of us, in sponsoring the webinar series. So if you need to buy any computers or anything like that, check out our Dell discounts before you buy something else. And I'll also announce that at some point I may have to step off for a couple of minutes, but I will be back. But that's okay because Melissa always carries the load anyway. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Melissa.
Okay, good morning, everyone. As you can see, we have a new webcam, so I'm like in HD, which means that I can't get away with half the makeup and not doing my hair every day, but you guys are worth it. So let's jump right into federal, and then I think we're going to spend probably most of our time on reopening, since I feel like that is going to be where our questions come from. P3, we continue to get more information from Treasury as it pertains to the P3 loans and the forgiveness parameters of it. Keep in mind that nothing has changed regarding the terrible, heinous requirements that you have to meet, or you are unable to meet as a restaurant. Nothing's changed on that front yet, but we are getting more guidance from Treasury. I did do a bit of a deep dive last week in terms of what some of that guidance is. We got a little bit more over the weekend. It is an interim final rule, so we are expecting some hopeful change in the guidance. But I do want to bring up one piece that we talked about a little bit last week that you really need to start thinking about in terms of forgiveness of the loan. So we did get clarification that if you offered an employee their job back and they said, no, I want to stay on unemployment and refuse to come back, you would not be held liable for that. Over the weekend, Treasury took a step further and essentially said, that's true, but you now need to submit that person to the state unemployment office, that UC Form 1921, to prove that you offered them their job back, they refused, and you informed this unemployment office that they did not come back to work. That is now a parameter that you will need to meet to bypass that 75-25 when it comes to bringing your employees back. I know the National Restaurant Association and the American Hotel and Lodging Association are pushing back on that. We have enough trouble as it is, let alone adding on to that a mandate that we have to turn people in if they don't accept a job offer back, and then we have angry, upset employees that return at the end of the day. So that is guidance that has come out, and we're hoping to get that changed via either a change in the guidance or legislation, which I will touch upon in a moment. And also, there was a little bit more clarification on that full-time employee equivalent. As we mentioned, 40 hours is the standard in the forgiveness. There's also options to include whether somebody is a full-time equivalent, which counts as one, they're working 30 hours a week, which is 0.75 of a full-time equivalent, or part-timers, which would be half of a full-time employee equivalent. So please look at the forgiveness document. There's a lot of information on that, and I did a little bit of a deep dive last week on some of those P3 parameters. So 75-25 hasn't changed. 8 weeks hasn't changed. Nothing has changed on how you can use the loans as it pertains to right now the loan forgiveness under the P30. To that end, we do have legislation that's going to move tomorrow. It's scheduled to move in the House. It's sponsored by Congressman Chip Roy from Texas. He basically voted for the HEROES Act in an effort to get a P3 change piece of legislation through the House and to the Senate and hopefully to the President. This contains the changes that we've been talking about for weeks that we need to operate. That bill extends the forgiveness period from 8 weeks to 24 for rehiring. So it gives you up to 24 weeks to bring your employees back. It extends that covered period to December 31st. So the June 30th would be out the window. You would have until December 31st for the covered period. It would eliminate the 75-25 rule, and it would extend those loan terms that were initially 2 years or 10 years in the bill. Treasurer made 2 years. This would make it 5 years. And then it clarifies that payroll tax deferment, because there is that employee retention tax credit, payroll tax provisions that if you've got the P3, you can't take advantage of. This would make tweaks to some of those tax provisions to allow you to take advantage of them. We expect the House to pass the bill tomorrow. We expect bipartisan support. If you've been getting, well, I know you all have been reading the daily updates diligently, but please activate when you're asked to as it pertains to that legislation in terms of the P3 fixes. Further P3 changes, refunding, 501c6s, all of that is going to be part of a HEROES Act or expansion bill. It would be the next kind of COVID recovery package. This is very much just addressing the issues that are in the current P3 rules. So please, like I said, pay attention to the daily update. We only ask you to activate when we need you to. And of course, this is going to be huge for all of you that are trying to figure out how the heck you bring employees back when you're not open. Congress generally, it's kind of like our state legislature right now, which we'll touch upon in a little bit. They're just dropping bills like whoa. They are doing recovery packages. We have bills that are doing, like I said, recovery package. We have bills that would do tax credits for small businesses that would cover your PPE. So you would get 50% tax credit for the PPE that you buy for your employees. All of these pieces of legislation are circulating, and I do not expect any individually to get across the finish line, but they are part of a broader discussion as it pertains to that recovery, next COVID recovery package. Another key one for my hotels and also for my destination marketing organizations on the phone, there is a two-pronged attack to try and freeze per diem rates. Recognizing that as we are in this state and as rates for hotel rooms are going down, there could be a push to lower the per diem rates at the federal level and what those standards are. There's legislation that would freeze them, and there's also a push working with the federal government to freeze them as well, so that there won't be any increases in per diems. We would be surprised if that were the case, but it wouldn't be any decreases either. So we do expect that to get across the finish line, either regulatorily or legislatively. So like I said, Congress is in. Pay attention to the P3, pay attention to these ongoing discussions that are occurring between the House and Senate. We will have another COVID recovery package. We just aren't sure what that's going to look like yet because of a Democratic-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate. So all of those things are percolating right now, and we will, of course, like I said, activate you when we need to. Otherwise, just keep you informed. So if there's something that you're really passionate about, the per diem rates are what make you happy, you can activate on that as well. Next slide. Okay. Whew. Let's just get right into it. I don't know how many of you are legislatively inclined, but there is a nightmare that exists in the world of lobbyists, and it's called Sunny Die. And Sunny Die is going to happen this year in Pennsylvania. And that's because of, understandably, what's going on with the state budget. This week, the House has already passed it. The Senate's working on it today. The legislature will be passing a state budget. It's only going to be for 5 months. This is because, obviously, our economy is down the toilet. And further, because of the pushback of taxes that was pushed back for personal income tax until July 15th, there is not enough money to do a full state budget, at least not a full state budget that the Republicans and Democrats can agree to. And in an election year, a tax increase in May is not something that you're going to see, I think, anybody want to put up a vote for. So it's 5 months and it's flat funded. So it's the same funding that everybody got in last year's budget, in the 1920 state budget. The only thing that's not flat funded, well, it's flat funded, but it runs for the year, is going to be education. So education is going to have the same funding that it had last year, and that will run for the entirety of the fiscal year. The goal is to come back. This runs until November 30th. The goal is to come back and revisit this after the elections, and I'll talk a little bit about Sunny Dye. For tourism-wise, we have not seen the final numbers, but we do not expect tourism to get much more than $2 million, $2 or $3 million, but we still have the funds in the restricted account. We will see, currently it's funded at 7.225. I will not put you to sleep with my opinion of where that line item sometimes goes to, but if we find out that that line item goes to anybody that is not a statewide tourism initiative, it will not come as a shock that we would be a little displeased on that front. So we have not seen the fiscal code, which delineates of that 7.225, how much is going to the State Office of Tourism. As of right now, it looks like our restricted account from the online travel company Loophole continues to be going to the tourism office. Doesn't mean a lot now since we don't have any occupancy to any extent, but as of right now, that is protected. So that's something that we'll be keeping an eye on. So what does this all mean? This means that in November, you should start praying for everybody, yourselves, me especially, John, because he's gonna have to deal with me, because we will be going into Sunny Dye, which means that after the elections are done in November, the legislature will return to session. This is a scary time because you have legislators who've announced they retired, and so they're done, but they're still technically our legislators until the end of the year. You have legislators who lost their reelection at the beginning of November, and they're coming back to vote. So, you know, they don't give a SHIT anymore about anything. And you have the rest of the legislature that just got reelected, and they are as far from their next reelect as they can be. Sunny Dye is a time where tax increases are passed, scary tax increases are passed, scary theories are passed, tons of bills are passed, because you can cobble together votes that you were never able to cobble together before. So that is going to be, right now we're kind of like just getting through and focusing on recovery packages, snagging that CARES Act money for all of you. And then November is going to be when we're going to be fighting like the Dickens on tax increases and other attempts to try and fill what could possibly be a $5 to $6 billion budget deficit. So that will be November. You have time to figure out how much vodka I'm going to need to get through it, but I can guarantee you it will be a lot. Other legislation, the House and Senate continue to pass legislation as it pertains to reopening. This is just an exercise in expressing their frustration. The House is sending bills to the Senate sending bills to the House, they're going to the governor, he's vetoing them. It's been happening for weeks, that's continuing. And we expect that to continue until the state is in green, and even then we're probably still going to see it happening. But it is to a certain extent achieving its goal in terms of, last week, the governor vetoed a bill that would have allowed for realtors to operate. That same day, he provided guidance for realtors to operate. So I think we are starting to see a recognition that Pennsylvania might need to be moving a little bit faster in the reopening process, especially as we're seeing some of our surrounding states jump into the reopening a little faster than we have so far. Other legislation that I mentioned a little bit before, there's about $3.9 billion from CARES Act that the state has to figure out how to spend. There's some hullabaloo over whether the governor can figure out how to spend it, how the legislature can figure out how to spend it, or if it's going to be a mix of the two. We are working on trying to get a grant put together that would go to small businesses. The number hasn't been set. My number is higher than what some legislators want, but it would be using some of that money to create a grant program for all of you, as we've discussed in the past. P3 is great. It's a little bit of a headache, but it's something. This would be a grant that would hopefully get a lot of you over the finish line, and we're working on that legislation as I speak. Other items, cocktails to go. I talked about this over the last few weeks. It did take effect, thank God, last week, and I know it has been so awesome to be watching all of the restaurants and what you've been posting and the creative things you've been doing, and it's just been awesome to see. I will speak for a moment to what I would like to refer to as Sangria Gate. There is pushback in terms of the legislation allows for spirits and non-alcoholic beverages to go. Sangria is a wine. You need if you use sangria or some other type of wine for your sangria, you need a wine expanded permit for that. That's that $2,000 permit that you need to get. That is why if you don't have that permit, you cannot sell sangria. I know it's frustrating, but I bet the people who paid for the $2,000 permit to sell wine to go and can sell sangria think that it makes a lot of sense. So I know there's been pushback on that. You do need a wine expanded permit to sell sangria. I have gotten, I think, more questions on that than anything else, but that is the answer to that. And of course, if you have any questions on the mixed drinks to go, cocktails to go, do not hesitate to reach out. From what I've seen, people are just, it's been awesome. So, and I've even seen some growlers, and I haven't gotten one yet, but don't give up on me yet. But I still might do it. So that's kind of where we are in the state of our state as of this moment. Next slide. Here come the questions. Reopening. Reopening. It's such a funny word now. Red to yellow. Everybody who has not hit yellow yet, and some of us, Dauphin County is one of them, are going to yellow Friday. Everybody will hit yellow next Friday or Friday at midnight. So June 5th, everybody's going to be in yellow. Nothing's changed in yellow. I will say this because I've gotten some questions, because it's a little difficult to understand. You are encouraged to telework if you can telework. So this isn't for my restaurants and hotels. You can't really telework. You're encouraged to in yellow. You're even encouraged to telework in green. You are not required to. So there is no requirement that you have to continue to telework. So if you are one of our allied members, if you're one of our destination marketing organizations, you are allowed to open, keeping in mind that you need to meet those business standards that were sent out by the governor. You need to be sanitizing. Your employees need to be wearing masks if they're close to one another. So you need to follow those guidelines, but you are allowed to reopen and go back to the office. There is no ban on that in yellow. Yellow to green. We got some basic parameters from the governor last week as he announced some counties will be going to green, and then Center County, my friends there, only Center County could be like, we don't want to, now we do, and then you do. So that will happen on Friday for a number of counties. We have gotten basic parameters from the governor, and for those of you on this call, it's that 50%, and the 50% is driving you crazy. I understand. We expect more information from the governor for our industry specifically. We expect it shortly. And I know when it is out, we will get all of the questions in the world, and we'll be prepared to answer all of those questions when it comes out. But generally, all of the restaurant parameters are going to be released, and when they do, then you'll know where you stand. And that will hopefully include outdoor dining as well for those of you that are going to be in yellow. So if you haven't hit green yet, we expect outdoor dining to be allowed in yellow beginning very shortly as well. And then John, do you want to cover, because you've been our, you know me, I can't work too much with the governor's office. I go a little crazy. So I give you that task about those conversations.
I'd be happy to. And again, if I all of a sudden go mute, Melissa, you'll have to take over because I may get a call. But I will say that the governor's office since April 20th, when we first submitted the Pennsylvania restaurant promise to them, have worked with us on and off on standards to try to make sure that as restaurants reopen, they open in not just a safe way, but a practical and sensible way. And the first real meaningful initiative on that was, as you know, many or most states have opened with capacities, and many of those at 25%, which was a CDC recommendation at one time. And when we spoke on Friday with the governor's office about that, the folks that are writing the standards, we commented that restaurants in other states have not opened at 25%. They couldn't afford to. And not surprisingly, there's going to be standards when we go to green. Otherwise, everybody believes there'll be another epidemic. I don't know whether there will be or not, but anybody that thought the green meant go, it was never planned to be go. It's just the next stage of reopening. So I will say that the governor's team quickly reacted to that and took the upper limits of what we talked about, which was 50%. For some of you, that means that's not enough. I understand that. But we're trying to balance safe and sensible. There is a question from Mike Leifer that I'll address now, and his question is, Is that between table to table or from guest to guest in different parties? And our recommendation was guest to guest in different parties. And I will say that we were asked to also provide recommendations for green phase dining. And we pulled together what we thought were the most sensible and yet practical ones. And again, they're not going to make everybody happy for sure. And I think that the governor's team has been good about trying to work with us in that regard. Obviously, we would have liked everything open sooner. That wasn't anything we had any say in, except that we were pushing to try to get outdoor dining in yellow a little bit sooner rather than later. So as Melissa previously said, there will be announcements shortly, obviously, because we're going to green phase on Friday. So there have to be announcements shortly on what the standards are going to be. And I would anticipate that there's going to be a lot of standards, as there have been in every state that's reopened, but that for the most part that they'll be workable, and as much as safe they can do safely, they'll be practical. So that's probably all I can say, is that I will say that while nobody's happy with the pace that we seem to be opening, I will say, and Fritz, our immediate past chairman, Bill Kowaleski, our chairman, Mike Axiotis, our board member and representative of the National Restaurant Association, have all joined me on calls with the team that is handling this, and we've all felt very good about the way that they've been working with us on this part of it, which was developing the standards. There's also been a lot of questions about catering. I would not anticipate that there's going to be any answers on that soon, but we have a catering task force that's worked for about a month now that developed some excellent standards. We've seen those as well, so they are submitted at least, and we're trying to make sure that all of the good information we can get into the hands of the governor's team that's developing this is there. So with that, Melissa, unless there's something else you want me to talk about, I'll be quiet and then try to answer any of the questions that deal with this particular subject that I can.
Sounds good. Yeah, as John mentioned, we do expect those parameters shortly, and outdoor dining to be permitted for everybody also shortly. So we will get that information out as soon as we are able to. And as John mentioned, we have been working with the governor's office on this, so they're listening, and I think that's certainly something. So I'll leave it at that. I think that's the end of my pitch, so I know I'm going to make a webinar pitch for Hope. Next slide. Hope, do you want me to make the pitch now, or do you want to go through this first?
You can make the pitch, and then I'll just pick up then.
So I'm going to offer one recommendation to all of you, and that's the 6-4 10 a.m. wage and hour considerations by the U.S. Department of Labor, and that pertains to the Families First Act. And we had a webinar on this back in March when this first passed. And a lot of you weren't thinking about Families First Act and what your requirements were because you were shut down. But you do need to think about it, because it does require you to offer paid leave to your employees if they come down with COVID, if a family member becomes down with COVID, if they can't work because their children are home, because their school has been shut down for COVID. This is a paid leave that you need to pay, and there are parameters and requirements to do so. So I know a lot of you back in March were like, well, I'm not even open, what does it matter? But this extends until December 31st. So this is something you're gonna need to be offering your employees between now and December 31st. So I get in March why you didn't think it was important, but Department of Labor is enforcing this. So I urge you, if you are not cool and comfortable and get the Families First Act, please plan to register and join that webinar, because you will get cited by the U.S. Department of Labor, and that's not a department that you want to mess with. So please register for that, since you will need to be providing that paid leave. It will be reimbursed by the federal government when you remit your taxes, but you will need to pay for that, and it does impact your P3 and your EIDL and all of that as well. So please register for that webinar. I can't help you if the U.S. Department of Labor comes after you. I can do a lot of things, but I can't help on that front. And then Hope, do you want to go over some of these other equally important, though not as scary, webinars?
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, we had this scheduled for this week, and we just didn't feel like we had the participation we needed, so we rescheduled it because we feel like it is an important webinar for our industry to be thinking about as we go into these next phases of reopening. Tomorrow's a great webinar that's being offered by Staunton Farm Foundation, Mental Health Resources. They'll have some psychiatrists on there. So if you have employees that you you know, yourselves, employees, anybody can join it. So definitely take a look at that on our website for the registration. Melissa will be back next week. We are coming up with a few other webinars that'll be popping up. They do go on the bottom of our updates and also onto our website. So please keep an eye out. And we do social media pushes on them the day before so that you know what's coming up. And Eco Lab is going to be doing a really good one next week too. They're going to be doing different phases of webinars about sanitizing, reopening, and things that you could be thinking of. So keep your eye out for those too. And with that, Eric, if you can go to the next slide. John, do you want me to just keep going? You can shake your head. Okay. Again, we are still working with Yingling and All-Star pitcher Aaron Nolan with their Cheers online auction. Please check it out. There's some really great things on there. It's easy to donate. It's as little as $20 and you get put into the drawing for different types of ticket packages or products and different events that are coming up in the future. So take a look at that. We will be awarding our first HARP grants starting next week, so we're very excited with that. And then Stratus Lounge will be doing another DJ event tomorrow, so we'll be putting that information out. It'll be on Instagram, so check it out. It's pretty fun. Carryout PA is still going strong with nearly 1,800 restaurants, so continue to promote this to your different counties and people in your counties so that they get their information up there, and we'll continue this on even after all of this. And our resources page, we've been adding even more on there, and I think we're going to be adding some additional information from Ecolab about sanitizers, EPA listings, so that you have an idea of what to get to start sanitizing and cleaning and getting yourself ready. That, I think that's the last slide, right, Eric? All right. I think we're ready for questions.
Let's see if I get as many as I did last week. I'm still recovering from last week's.
I know it was a tough day last week.
All right, so I know Michael got his question answered. I still have to get over to Michael's restaurant for a margarita, so I need to get that on the schedule. Would you suggest that we hold off on completing the P3 forgiveness application given the changes that could occur? If your P3 isn't up yet, I wouldn't start filling out the application. And I would say, let's see what happens with the vote tomorrow and see if the Senate's going to move it quickly. If it's changed, obviously that would change the forgiveness application. But if you can hold off, I would, as long as you still have some time left on your P3. It does not need to be filled out immediately. Let's see. My question today is if you have any info regarding legislation with insurance companies paying on business interruption. If I had the money of insurance companies, I would not be here with you today. Nothing has moved on business interruption yet. There is legislation out there. There are lawsuits out there that are circulating. I think the lawsuits are going to show our path. If the courts rule that this needs to be paid out, I think that's a path. But at this point in time, these companies that have billions of dollars set aside to fill insurance claims are spending a lot of that money on legislators asking them not to move legislation that would require them to pay it out. So I would say don't give up on it yet, but I think it's going to need to be more of a federal fix. It's going to be more or less funding coming from the federal government running through the insurance companies as part of a recovery package than business interruption. But we are definitely watching these lawsuits that are out there because that's really going to dictate a path forward for us. And then also taking into consideration, how will these policies look after COVID? Is this a policy that should continue to be maintained? Should there be changes? I think that's going to be a longer term congressional question as it pertains to some of those policies. But bills haven't moved yet. We've been asking. But it does seem like our clear path forward is going to be getting that recovery money to all of you as opposed to getting into a nasty showdown with some of these insurance companies, at least at the state level. But we get a path. You guys all know me. I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna run with it. 3 questions. Green is the new yellow. Essentially, it seems we are stuck in the same mud as we were before. As green is nothing more than yellow other than 50%. What are the odds we can keep changing the definition of yellow and green? I think we can, and I think that we're going to see some changes as it pertains to that 50% number. So we are looking at, for outdoor dining, 50% not to be the number, because we want you to be able to expand your space so you can seat more people. So we're looking to allow that expansion for you there. We're also looking, when you're indoor, we also know that a lot of you, even at 50%, if you just do the social distancing, you're not going to be able to seat 50%. You just don't have enough space for it. So barriers are going to be key in that. And we're seeing this. I think every week we're seeing movement in terms of the governor's office changing some rules, changing some regulations, recognizing what the CDC is saying as it pertains to our industry and how the virus spreads. So I would not say that what we get from the governor's office for yellow and green for our industry is going to be firm forever. I think we're going to see changes, and we have been working with the governor to recognize some of the unique needs of our industry as well. Wolf's minimum wage of $12 towards $15. How does PRLA present this as a non-starter? Yes, I realize we may not win the battle, but we need to show them negative impact on employment, inflation, business closures. We're not going to have $15 minimum wage. We're not going to have $12. If you were to talk to anybody in the Republican caucus in the House and Senate, their heads might explode if it's brought up to them. I mean, we were negotiating $9, $9.50 a few months ago, and that's off the table. The governor, it's a talking point. It's just something that their party has aligned behind. He has to do his due diligence to put it out there. We understand that. PRLA is opposed to it more than ever, and recognizing that our industry is decimated, and we can't even, I mean, we're going to have tens of thousands of employees that might never come back to work. This is not the time to talk about a $15 minimum wage. So I do not see this being part of any type of recovery package or anything, especially in the Republican-controlled House and Senate. Now, come November, Sunny Die, minimum wage might be part of it. It really might, but I don't see 12 and I don't see 15. We need to do a PA only on 50% to small to keep businesses open, and hence very bad consequences on employment, tax revenues, business closures. Yes, I mean, 50% is not going to get you guys out of this. We know that. That's why we're focusing really hard on allowing that expansion of outdoor seating. That's why we're at, I mean, as John mentioned, the governor's office was initially at 25 to 30%. I don't know if there's anybody in the country we can look who's above 50% right now. Maybe some people are, but as we've said, and I will sometimes say I want to shoot for the stars and then I'll negotiate back. This isn't a scenario that I think we can shoot for the stars, because then the door gets shut on us. So I think 50% is a good place to start. And I think that the conversations are going to continue, recognizing that 50% isn't going to get you guys out of this, and we know that. What is the proper name of the Sangria Gate Sell Wine to Go permit? It is a wine expanded permit, is what you need to sell wine to go. A glass of wine, a carafe of wine, if they're taking it out the door and going home with it, you need a wine expanded permit. So that's the official, or those of us, LCB nerds call it a WEP. Let's see. What have the discussions been so far with Green, so far as weddings, meetings, banquet facilities, something similar to Ohio with max of 300 of facility capacity? Would it be based on fire code occupancy or something along those lines? What is the max gathering number under Green? Or are banquet facilities under the same guidance as restaurants at 50%? John, do you want to take this one?
I'd be happy to take it, Maggie, and Melissa. Maggie, the large event gatherings are very complicated, and our catering and events task force, and some of you are on the phone, came up with what I would describe as a very elegant solution to differentiate between private events and public events. And a private event would be defined as an event where the host has control of the guest list. So a wedding would fall into that, and most of the other things that you've mentioned here. And and we're making the case that a private event should be treated differently, because the host knows who's coming, they know where they came from, place of origin, that thing. And we also agree with you that the number that Ohio put in is probably a good number if you have to pick a number. Some people don't think you should have to pick a number, but if you have to, the 300 number is a pretty good number. And then there's other parameters that are going to go into this as well. As I said, the task force worked really hard to develop some really good parameters. They've been submitted. All of this is just me giving you what I know, which has nothing to do with what will ultimately happen. So you just have to understand that. But I do want you to know that we're taking this very seriously as part of our mission to try to help the industry. And I do know that, and you can imagine that the governor's office is getting tons of calls about weddings in particular. And so we viewed this as a way to give them a solution to weddings and other private events. But I don't know whether whether this will get picked up on right away or not, but it is over there right now.
Okay. Let's see. Susan, hi Susan. Many restaurants are inviting their guests to purchase takeout and dine in their outdoor spaces. Is this currently allowed? Our good friends at the LCB. No, it's not. It's not allowed. We had I called it the double down from the LCB as it pertains to outdoor dining. What happened was in yellow, understandably, restaurants, understandably again, thought, well, there's got to be some shift in red to yellow. So something that we can do. So the assumption was that if they get their takeout, they can sit at the outdoor seating area and eat their takeout there. The LCB 2 weeks ago, today, May 13th, put out an advisory opinion that basically doubled down and said if you weren't allowed to do it in red, you're not allowed to do it in yellow. So there can be no people on your property, on your outdoor space, eating or drinking, or even in your parking lot, eating or drinking under the LCB enforcement. So if people are, and ag is enforcing as well if you don't have a liquor license. So they did double down. Like I said, we expect an announcement for outdoor dining soon, but anybody who's doing it now, it is not permitted under the LCB. They were even kind enough to highlight the section where they doubled down in advisory notice number 26, not that I haven't memorized. So that is not permitted. I know people are doing it. I can only tell you what is and is not permitted. And to that end, I do want to touch on something. I know how frustrated you all are, and I don't disagree that I think our industry should be farther along in this reopening process than we are. I think we all agree with that. If you reopen and when you can't, you will lose your license. You'll lose either your liquor license will get pulled from by the LCE, or you will lose your operating permit from ag and you will get fined. I know you're frustrated. I know you're going to do it, and I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't do. But I urge you, when you have others that are saying, do it, do it, do it, recognize the implications it could have on your license. I get it. It's terrible. This is a terrible time. You should be able to open. But I have to say it again. We can't save you here. The governor has unilateral control. The courts have said that. So please be careful if you are going down that path, because there's not much that we can do for you other than tell you what the implications would be, and they're not good. Especially as it pertains to if you do it, some of the things, if you lose your liquor license or you get cited, you might not be able to sell mixed drinks to go anymore. So there are implications to some of those decisions, and I will remind you of that again. And I know PRLA members are generally not the ones to do it, but I also know you're frustrated, and I just want to warn you on that front. Hope, when will the link be posted for the Family First webinar?
I will have that link later today, and then that will be up on our website for you to register for.
With the limited budget that has been passed, what can you share about House Bill 2004, funding state parks and forest conservation, recreation and libraries, and other valuable services? If signed, it could limit or give more control to legislators on how funding is used. So I pulled it up, and I mean, right now, it's on the House calendar. I'd have to look and see if it's running today. It's certainly out there. I'd have to look at the bill again, Denise, and see what exactly it does. Funding is just an issue. If it's legislation we saw before, we would just want to be careful where they're getting some of that funding to make sure that they're not pulling it from other places. But I can take a look at that and circle back. It is on the House calendar today, but it has not been slated to move, at least not yet. But I have not checked the House calendar for the day yet. I see Cisco is a PRLA sponsor. My Philly rep sent me an informative listing of the types of sanitation products we might use to open up. Would you like me to reduce the material to a 1 or 2 page PDF document for sharing with our peers. Do we have any of that already, Hope or Eric?
I do from Ecolab. I have that, but I can reach out to Cisco too, and get their information too, because we're trying to get as many resources as we can. So Bob, I'll reach out to them and see what I can get. I'm sure they have a document they can send to me.
Yep. So there you go, Bob. That's that answer. Delivery fees are taking a huge bite into restaurant revenue. Other cities, states have capped third-party delivery fees. Is this at all possible to do in PA? We are looking at this in Philadelphia right now. We are looking at doing this statewide as well. With that being said, it's hard for us. We could look and say during the crisis, you can't charge fees over 15%. And then when the crisis is over, they're back up to 30 or 40%. And you're all as frustrated as you were before because you're still not back to normal and they're still taking an obscene amount of money from restaurants. So we are looking at 2 fronts on this. One is the requirement that they have an agreement with you in the first place, because I know that's a problem where you have some of these drivers showing up to pick up an order that you know nothing about because you don't even have an agreement with them. And 2 is really that transparency piece of they'll say, if you order $50 worth of food, we'll take $10 off. And you, the consumer, don't realize that that $10 is coming off the business, the restaurant. So we are working on that. Similar to our friends in the insurance industry, our Uber Eats, Grubhub friends of the world have a lot of money to try and stop this at the state level. It's not going to stop us from dropping legislation. It's not going to stop us from our long-term goal of addressing this. But we are taking a first crack at it in Philadelphia, maybe Pittsburgh, and seeing where that takes us. So it's on the radar. We're working on it. At the same time, we want to be using our resources wisely, at least in the short term, and getting what we know we can get now, and then working on our long-term goal for some of those other pieces. But we are seeing pushback from some elected officials as well, just peer pressure by saying, the fact that you're doing this and taking advantage of a crisis is ridiculous. And we're certainly seeing a lot of you posting to have people come and pick up their own and not do delivery. And I think we're making some traction there, but it definitely is a state and local item. I know you touched on this a little bit, but do you think outdoor dining will be allowed in yellow by mid-June? Yes, I think it will be allowed by next week. And then Hope has 6-4 for the webinar link. Any liability or legislation on liability insurance protection from COVID-19 claims on the state level from lawsuits. We have legislation. I just sent an email again last night. Senator Pat Stefano is drafting legislation. I sent a follow-up email to his team at about 6 o'clock last night and said, when will you be introducing it? Because we're prepared to be very active in that space, recognizing that you will all need that protection to reopen. So we hope to have news on that by our next legislative update. If they haven't gotten back to me, they are passing the budget today, so it's a little rowdy up in the Capitol. So if they don't get back to me in the next day or two, I will follow up with them. But we do expect that legislation to be introduced, and that is a piece of legislation that we will be activating all of you to engage on in terms of getting that across the finish line. And this is my shortest update so far.
I know. I think they're giving you a break from last week.
We're gonna have plenty of work to do in the near future, John and I. So don't worry, you'll get your time out of us. Yeah,
exactly. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. As always, we recorded this and we'll be sending this out to you. We'll be posted on our website and being sent out. Thank you, Melissa and John.
One more question. You don't need to ask questions just because.
What? One more question.
No, Maggie was threatening me.
I was like, wait, no more questions. Well, we appreciate everybody getting on with us, and we hope everybody has a good rest of the week. And as always, give us a call if you have any questions, or go to our website and submit your questions, and we will be there for you.
I think you'll be hearing from us sooner than later.
I think so too. Well, thank you guys. Thanks, Melissa and John, and thank you, Eric, for doing the webinar, and have a nice day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.